I work at Valve. I'm a designer there. Let's see. At Valve, we make games, and you may have heard of some of them. We also make a gaming platform called Steam, where we sell over 1,500 games, and we run a social platform with over 30 million users worldwide. Not everyone who knows us knows that we also make comics and films. I had a cool opportunity to work on Portal 2, which is our most recent release. It's a game that can be played single player or with a friend. Here's some examples of that. And the gist of the game is that there's a sort of a physics environment that you're battling against this series of puzzles that you need to solve using physics. We also created a comic in support of that game. Here, the main character who you play, Chell, is depicted on the cover of that. We also made a series of short films to promote the game. This one's promoting, well, we did a series of kind of mock ads for the technologies available in the game. Sort of like you too can invest in this. And here we're talking about Chell and her special boots, which are a technology that you can invest in. So when we create all these different types of content, it turns out that we have fans who like to participate in the creation of that content as well. So this is an example of some fan art that I pulled off the web, just to show the feedback that we get from customers and how that really helps us generate ideas for where to take our games next or what to try next. This is an example of a painting one of our fans created, and we bought the rights to print. So we took this photo to send to her in thanks. So I wanted to talk about Valve today because I think that there's a lot of things about the way that the company is organized and the way that we work that enables me as a designer to have great relationships with my peers. We've been around for 15 years. We were founded by Gabe Newell, who was responsible for the first 3 versions of Windows here at Microsoft. We have about 300 employees, and we have a pretty high retention rate. We also are lucky to enjoy a really high revenue per employee. So recently at Valve, there was an email thread that went around to this comic, which I believe is created by an engineer who works at Google. And the comic was depicting a series of organizational charts of various well-known companies. And this was the first of those, depicting Amazon.com, which, to his mind, obviously is a really traditional structure. He then went on to depict his vision of what it might be like at Google and Facebook. Whee! This was his depiction of Apple, where regardless of who you work for, you end up working for that one guy. And who knows, maybe it'll look like this soon. But then we come to Microsoft, and I thought this was really interesting. Yeah. So as someone who worked for Microsoft for a number of years, I found this to be entertaining. Yeah. And as it went around Valve, we were really thinking to ourselves, well, what does our org chart look like? We've never really illustrated it. And in the most traditional sense, you could say it looks like this, where I mentioned Gabe Newell, our founder. He's the president, and then you have everyone else. Someone else tossed this idea out, saying, well, no, it's, as much as Gabe would like to be able to say that he can tell anyone what to do and he's in charge, it's just not true. We're all kind of determining how we do our work and who we work with and what we work on. And then this idea went around, which was that, well, actually, maybe it's more like Chet, one of our writers, works for everyone else. And then this was one of my favorites. If you're familiar with Tempest, I thought this was a really good depiction of how we work. So you might be asking yourself, well, what kind of people work at Valve? Well, none of these people, it turns out. We don't have any project managers or producers or testers or usability engineers or production staff. We do all that work ourselves. There's designers, engineers, writers, artists, animators. And each of us is responsible for playing those other roles. For example, as a designer at Valve, these are the sorts of things that I do, and they're the things that I choose to do. So as a result, we actually don't have job titles either. And it's interesting what effect that has on the way we work. It allows us to make decisions about how we spend our time. I'm a copywriter. I write press releases. I'm an interior decorator. There's nothing I won't do, and the same can be said of my peers. So not only do we not have managers, there are a lot of other things that I think can impact the way that you and your peers and you and your customers interrelate. And at Valve, we're lucky enough that we have just a customer base as our audience. It's not really luck so much as the company has been designed that way, and it's a really conscious choice that we're in charge of our own destiny and that relationship with our customers. So maybe our organizational structure is less like this and more like this, where customers are really part of the equation. And while I have direct access to my peers, I also have direct access to my customers. And they are a huge part of that design process. So this is a typical example of a workspace at Valve. We call them cabals, and they're just big rooms that we share. And what you see in this room is a series of people who are working together on a particular project. And everyone's sitting in such a way that their backs are to one another in small groups. And that is intentional so that we're able to turn around and quickly share ideas. And we do that all the time. So that's an interdisciplinary team, I should mention. So it turns out we don't end up speccing much of anything. Instead, we've got desks on wheels, and we just have to unplug a couple of cables and roll to another room. And so we vote with our feet. Everyone decides what they want to work on and what they want to contribute to, and they go make themselves a part of it. So in working on Portal 2, this being just a quick screenshot of that game, as a designer on the team, well, I had a chance to design Steam for the PlayStation. So this is Gabe Newell. He's on stage here at E3 on Sony's stage. And this took place a while ago. You may remember, if you follow the industry at all, that he stood on stage and announced Portal 2 is coming to the PlayStation 3. Well, that was kind of a big deal, and he was essentially eating crow because he had previously said that the PlayStation 3 was a pile of crap. It should be completely scratched and started over from the beginning. So not only did he say Portal 2 is coming to the PlayStation 3, but he also said it's going to include Steam, and it's going to be the best version of the game on any console. So a lot of people were surprised by all of that news and sort of asked themselves, wow, what does that mean? What does Steam on the PlayStation 3 look like? They both have, well, there's the PlayStation network, there's the Steam community. How are those things going to interrelate? That sounds a little bit confusing, but I'd like to hear more. And as a designer on Steam and Portal 2, and along with my peers, we were watching Gabe on stage and sort of had the same reaction, quite frankly. Wow, what does that look like? So it's funny, when Gabe announces something, he considers it shipped and moves on to the next idea. So back at the studio, we were sort of saying, okay, well, what does that mean? And we had the chance to define the feature set, work through kind of the sticky issues between the two networks and how they would come together to make an awesome experience for customers so that you and a buddy can play the game together regardless of what network you sign into. So these are some examples of the features in the UI that we shipped. So we have dozens of these rooms at Valve, and we all work this way by projects, interdisciplinary groups working together. And so as a result, ideas come from anywhere. And because people are always coming and going, working on various projects, it becomes the case that everyone has ideas and opinions and deserves a chance to contribute to the work that we're doing. Not only do ideas come from anywhere, but they also ship every day. So we, as the project creators, are ultimately the decision makers in what happens in a product as we make it. So we're all responsible for the customer experience. And it turns out that everyone we hire is responsible for the customer experience. And this is really very different than anywhere else where I've worked. In that, well, we don't have job titles, we don't have managers. Our guards are down, and we're really just collaborating on an equal footing. I could never say something like, well, I'm the designer, so we should really do it this way. I think this is best. Because we've hired people who have quite a bit of experience working in design, I'm able to trust their judgment. They're able to trust mine. And a lot of work gets done, frankly, that doesn't even involve me, and it's good. So I can trust my peers. Everyone I work with is experienced and good at making decisions based on data. Every time we ship a feature, we always think, well, what are the goals of that feature? How would we measure its success? And we ship it. We don't do a bunch of work to understand whether it's the right thing before we just get it out there. We get real data from real users, whether that's in a beta fashion or an actual feature that we just toss out there. And we make mistakes all the time, but our customers love us for it because they see us quickly fix those mistakes in response to their feedback. The people I work with are very strong collaborators, and again, recruiting is the biggest component of that. When we interview someone, we don't ask them, well, tell me about a time when you were awesome. Instead, we just sit down and we put them to work, and we work with them. And if that goes well, then that's a really promising story, and we talk further. Everyone, again, is responsible for the customer experience as well. And we really try to communicate in a really transparent fashion with one another. We don't gossip with others. We just go directly to one another and say, I have ideas about what you're doing, or I really want your feedback on what I'm doing. Let's work together on this. Can we make that happen? Let's ship this. Let's try that. And it just works. It allows us to be really agile. So we're able to trust our hiring process, and as a result, we can trust each other. And so work just works. And so you might be asking yourself, well, that sounds interesting. That's one way to work. How do I take advantage of that? How can I learn from that and apply it where I am? And you might be designing a new company where you can follow some of these ideas or pick and choose what makes sense to you. Or you might just be working your job wondering, what can I do? Well, I think the number one thing you can do is get really engaged in recruiting. And there's no one in this room who shouldn't be a part of choosing who their peers or their managers are. This is the most important thing that we do. And interestingly, I spoke with a developer who said, I don't think, he's been with us for a while. And he said, I don't think I would even get a job at Valve anymore. So I doubt that's true, but he was just saying that he sees us constantly raising the bar, and that's a good thing. We're always looking for people who can collaborate, and if you as a designer or an engineer can really go out of your way to collaborate with others and facilitate things, that's just goodness. You can always be looking at data, and there's no reason to collect more data than you need. I made the mistake of running a usability study at Valve when I first started there, and I spent probably 2 months making a prototype and then testing it. Assessing the data, writing a report, providing that report to my peers, and they just threw their arms up. What have you done? Why did you do that? That was such a freaking waste of time. I mean, really, did we need to be so formal? It's pretty much plain as day that was a decent design. We could have just shipped it, seen what happened, and corrected our errors really quickly. So I learned. And I guess that story also kind of tells that transparency is super valuable. If we can just be honest with one another and direct, we can focus on our work and not all the nonsense around it. ultimately, if we can all focus on the impact that we're having on our customers, that allows us to focus on our work and do our good jobs. And sometimes there are other pieces of the equation to consider, but ultimately, it's the customer who's our key audience, and we need to keep that in mind. That's it. Thanks.